You gotta love summer, especially if you're somebody who likes to record audio in your house and you live in a neighborhood where it seems that as soon as you sit down and start doing it, somebody around you, one of your neighbors, has to pull out some really loud, annoying yard equipment like a lawnmower or a leaf blower or a grinder. Today it's a chainsaw. Can you hear that in the background? Every time I sit down and do a video, man, somebody cranks something like that up. So hopefully that won't be too annoying. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to my fun little video called 10 Things I Love About Linux. I've been taking a break from doing videos and writing articles because my kids are out of school. They're getting ready to go away for their summer vacation, so I've been spending time with them. But I thought I would take a break from a break and do this video because I want to ramble on a little bit about this. These are things that I always tell people when they ask me, what is so cool about Linux? Some of this is stuff that just geeks me out, okay? It's not something that I think you have to love about Linux, just things that I like about Linux. And it's one of the reasons that these are some of the reasons, let's put it that way, that I love using the system. So let's just jump right in. First off, one of the things I really like about Linux is the fact that drivers are included in the kernel. And a lot of times, hardware just works. And if there is a driver that is available, you can get a little GUI tool like the driver manager here in Linux Mint, which I'm showing in this picture, and you can use that tool to install your driver. And if everything goes well, then your piece of hardware is going to be supported. It's very simple. If you have worked with Windows at any time, you will know that one of the biggest pains about using the Windows systems is finding drivers for things, especially if you have a computer that's sick and you need to reload Windows and you don't necessarily have all the installation disks for all the stuff. That means that you're going to have to go on the internet and you're going to have to see if you can find those drivers, and that's like stepping into a minefield because there are so many malware-loaded sites out there that claim to give you a driver but actually give you a bunch of malware when you download it, and it is very tricky even for people who are experienced at working with Windows machines. The last time that I actually loaded a Windows machine was about 3 years ago, so maybe things have changed a bit, but I am pretty sure that they haven't, because that just seems to be the way things go. Not every piece of hardware works with Linux. And sometimes you do run into something that you just can't make work, or the driver doesn't work or something like that. But I get around that by doing a little research in advance and trying to figure out what works best before I actually buy a piece of hardware. The last two computers that I have purchased, I have made sure that they had stuff in them that was either supported out of the box or it was something that I knew that I could get a driver for quite easily and it wouldn't be that big of an issue. And in one case, I had an old machine, the old E-machine that I used to post videos from all the time. That machine had a video card in it that was not supported by any version of Windows past Windows XP. I think somebody told me that there was a hack that you could get it to work, but in Linux, all I had to do was drop the disk in, install it, and the drivers were installed. And I'm talking about the OS installation disk. I didn't have to go find a driver disk to do that. And that machine's video worked better than it ever did on Windows under Linux. So that's definitely one of the things that I really like about Linux. And I just buy hardware that will work. You know, if you get an HP printer, you're pretty much assured that when you plug it in, Linux is going to have no problem working with it. Brother printers are like that as well. And there are other brands out there, so just do a little research. And don't use drivers as an excuse for not using Linux. Just go buy another piece of hardware. It's cheap. You know, if it doesn't work on your current stuff, wait until you can afford to get the stuff that will. Then give it another try. You know what I mean? I hear that all the time. People go, well, it doesn't work with my such and such, so therefore I'm not going to use Linux. I'm like, okay, not now, but don't give up on it. Wait until you get the hardware. Of course, these days you can buy computers from companies like System 76, Dell, HP, Purism. There's a bunch of people out there that sell machines that come preloaded with Linux, and all of the drivers are already done and included. You know it's going to work. So if you want to get into Linux and you got the cash, you can buy yourself a brand new machine preloaded and you can rock and roll. And it's one of the things that I really enjoy about working with the system. New clients are always amazed when we install Linux on their system. If I'm working with somebody, through Easy Linux, and we install, let's say, Linux Mint, and then the system boots up and everything works. It's just like, oh, it's all there. No proprietary drivers available. Your system is good to go. It always freaks them out. It's like, I don't have to install drivers? No, you don't. Another thing that I love about Linux, everybody has a home, and this is really goes back to Unix, because Linux is a work-alike for Unix. When Linus Torvalds came up with the Linux kernel, he wanted to put it on a Unix-like system. And Unix has this concept for machines that have multiple users that everybody's stuff goes into a home directory. So you look at the home directory, and then you'll see everybody's user account is in there. And under that user account is all their files, all their settings. And the permissions are protected on the files so that other people can't get into your stuff and you can't get into theirs. It's very cool how that is all set up. When I work with people who are using Windows, a lot of the time, if they're novice computer users, they absolutely, positively don't know where their files are. I'll say, okay, well, download this so we can do this. And then they can't find the file because they have no clue where Windows is putting things. And, of course, they tried to make that a little better. They came up with these little libraries that you could build, and then you could group things and all that stuff. But really, a lot of that's just over people's heads. In Linux, I can always point them out and say, look, here's your home folder. This is where it lives. Here's where you put your documents. Here's where you put your music. You put your videos and your pictures, and there you go. And then we know where everything is, and it makes it a lot easier. So this is the file structure of the system, I guess you could say. The next thing that I want to talk about is ext4, which is a file system. Okay, file system has two meanings in the world of Linux, in computers in general, actually. It can mean the structure of directories and files, just like we were just talking about, or it can mean the format that is used to store data on your hard drive. Pretty much the default file system that you'll find on most Linux distributions these days is ext4. And it is a really good file system, and I have been using ext4 since it was first introduced, which I think was somewhere around 2010. And I have never, not once, had a file get corrupted, get messed up. I've never had a file system crash on a drive. It just seems to work. ext4 is extremely good at not fragmenting itself. So you can have a Linux system up and running for 2 or 3 years and never do any maintenance to it at all, and then do a fragmentation report using the e4defrag utility, and it'll come up and it'll say fragmentation is 0. There's so little that the system says you don't need to defrag the drive. I've had that happen to me. So what I usually do is when I build a new system, and we're talking, of course, about a spinning hard drive, not a solid state drive here, I'll go ahead and after I get everything all installed and all the files moved into it, if it's got a spinning drive on it, I'll run the e4defrag on it, and then that just goes through and makes sure everything's all in nice, neat blocks and all that stuff. And then from that point forward, I never have to worry about it again. The system will not fragment itself. ext4 works in such a way that it creates space on the drive. And if you look at the NTFS file system for Windows, to get that system to fragment, all you have to do is load a bunch of data onto it. I mean, just copy files from an external drive onto the system. And then go look at the fragmentation, and you'll see that it gets really fragmented. And that's just the way the NTFS system works. Also, I had a running problem with NTFS, and we're talking for years on all kinds of different hardware, of having large files get corrupted. It happened over and over again, like big video files and disk images and things like that. I'd go back to read that file and then it wouldn't be able to read it. So that's something that I'm really glad that I never have to worry about. And the NTFS system breaks itself over time, whereas ext4 doesn't seem to do that. I don't have to worry about the file system with Linux. It just seems to work. And the fellow who came up with the it's called the extension file system for Linux. There's extension 2, 3, 4, and they all have different properties and, that sort of thing. But the guy who came up with it was a fellow named Ted So, and he's a really cool dude. And if you look on YouTube and you look up extension file system and his name, and it's TSO, it's Ted So, and it's really cool to hear him talk about that sort of thing. If you're a nerd and you get geeked out by file systems. The other thing about ext4 is the fact that it has been able to adapt itself really well to working with solid-state drives. So if you have a solid-state drive on your system, you don't have to worry about your file system. It'll take care of it, and it works really, really well. So I know that not many of you guys out there are super nerds and you're not into file systems, so I'm going to move on. But I could talk more about ext4. It's one of my favorite parts of the Linux system. And yes, all of the noise these days about file systems is talking about ZFS and Btrfs. That's more advanced stuff. That's stuff for servers and nerds and stuff like that. ext4 is wonderful for a desktop, and it works great in most server applications as well. This is just a real quick thing here, talking about the terminal, talking about Bash. This is one of the coolest things about working with the Linux system. I hear people say things like, I'm afraid of the terminal, I don't want to use the terminal. I even hear people say, well, it's 2016, why should we have to open a terminal? Come on. I'll tell you why. Because it is efficient, it is powerful, and you can do things in a terminal very quickly that if you were using some sort of GUI where you had to click around and you had to find boxes to tick and things like that, whereas you can just type in some commands and you can get work done. It's awesome. It's like a whole world within your Linux system. And the more you learn about it, the cooler it gets. Right now, I'm using Bash all the time. I use SSH to get into my computers on my network to do maintenance on them. I transfer files back and forth in the terminal using SSH and the secure copy command. I use SSH to get into the server for the Easy Linux website and get things done that way. So it's really awesome. And, I was thinking about it. I have 3 or 4 computers floating around in this house right now. And if I had to maintain all of them the way I used to do it in Windows, which would mean get up and walk to the machine and do everything that needed to get done, I wouldn't fool with it. They would all just be in a terrible state. But in Linux, because I can use SSH from a terminal to get into all these machines, I can make it do all kinds of stuff. I mean, I just kind of sit there and rule the world, Let's see what's going on over here. Does this need an update? Does this need something? No, it's cool, So yeah, Bash is awesome, and using the terminal is something that you definitely need to look into learning about. And when you do learn about working in the terminal, one of the things I really love about Linux is Ask in Demand, because this is a tool that is really useful. So let's say that you're in a terminal and you're trying to remember how to do something with a particular command. You know the command that you need, but you don't quite know the syntax of how to make it work. Well, all you have to do is type in the word man and then the command that you want to learn about, and then you get this neat little reference here that comes up. Now, man pages don't tell you everything. Searching on the internet certainly will bring you a lot more information, but they will get you started. And it's just neat that the system has this pre-built, installed, and you don't have to mess with it. You just ask the man when you want to learn about a command. Let's see here. This is one of my big selling points to people who are coming to Linux from Windows, is the fact that you can install and update software all at once. So if I spin up a new Linux rig and I need to install all the software I need, and given that I'd say 80% of what I need is going to be in the repositories, then I just open up a terminal, I issue a command, I give it a list of packages to install, turn the machine loose, it goes out, gets all that software, and installs it on the system. And there's some software that I might want to get by downloading a deb package, there's some that I need to hook up PPAs to get, but I mean, if you're doing this on Windows, it's one at a time. So if you're rebuilding a system on Windows, you have to install each piece of software one at a time. You have to go download that piece of software, you have to install it, and then you have to find your installer disks or whatever. I know that they're starting to move to more of a quote-unquote app store environment in Windows, and of course we've been doing this in Linux for years. You just open up some tool and pick the package that you want and download it and put it on the system. But it's just so cool. And then once you get everything set up and installed, when you run updates on the computer, it updates everything. It updates the entire machine. It doesn't update just the operating system like Windows Updates does. And so therefore, you don't have things that are nagging you all the time that say, oh, I need an update, I need an update. And then all of this software is trying to run these little updater widgets in the background that are going out and phoning home to see if there's an update. In Linux, it's all handled by one system, and it's all done at the same time. Being able to do all the updates at once makes the system a lot more secure, and a lot of users that come from Windows, they're just so tickled that they don't have to worry about nags and trying to get things updated manually and it not working. So it's one of the things that I really love about how the Linux system works. Well, number 7 here is the fact that it's speedy and stable, and it is very low maintenance, which is something that makes me happy when I am working with a lot of different machines. As I said earlier, I've got 3 or 4 computers floating around here. And take, for instance, the laptop that my kids use all the time. I do very little with that machine. It just runs, and I don't have to worry about it. And Windows has this thing where as you run it, it gets slower and slower and slower. And then you have to go in and you have to clean out the system. You have to do all this kind of crazy stuff. Linux doesn't do that. I've had machines run 2 or 3 years with just very minimal maintenance and with the same operating system on them, and they just work. It just keeps on chugging. And the maintenance that you can do, I mean, you can use programs like BleachBit to dump junk files and things you don't need off the system, but you don't have to. It just works. And that is one of the things that I really like about it. And it's fast. I had a guy say the other day that on his computer that his Hackintosh installation and his Windows installations always run faster than Linux. And I was really surprised at that because what I find is it's exactly the opposite. Linux in general will run much faster on any given machine than the corresponding Windows operating system that's supposed to go on it. I don't know about Mac equipment because I don't play with it, but it's always a faster experience to run Linux. And even if you have a pretty low resource machine, you can get a distribution of Linux that's made to handle those sorts of machines. And it's amazing the performance that you can get out of really modest equipment. So, that's cool. Also, Linux is very stable. Once you get this set up, once you get this installed, it's just going to run. Unless something happens to break the system, if an update goes bad, which it doesn't, it's very rare that actually happens, or the user themselves trashes something on the system, it's just going to keep chugging. And I have a lot of easy Linux clients that I hear from on a regular basis that just say it just keeps on going, it's just doing its thing. So that's another thing I love about Linux. It's not like Windows, where I remember when I was running these big networks, man, these automation systems and radio stations, and we would have several Windows machines that were doing different tasks on the network. And every 2 or 3 days, those machines needed to be rebooted because they'd just get slow, they'd just bog down, and it was a big pain. And I mean, we're talking about how many machines on this one network? So there were 12 machines that made up this network, plus a server, plus another machine. So there was 13, 14 machines that ran this big radio installation that I was working at. It was like 6 radio stations all in one building, a cluster of stations, and it was a big unified system. So there were like 14 or 15 machines that were all contributing to keeping that thing on the air on that network. And it was a big pain because they would just lock up and you'd have to go around and slow down, something would screw up. About once every 3 days, I just had to go in a big circle and just reboot all of those machines. Something you don't have to do with Linux. Amen. Another thing that I love about working with Linux is the fact that you don't get junkware. It just doesn't happen, man. So if you're running a Windows machine and you should happen to install Java on it, and then Java begs for an update, so you go and do the update. When you download the installer, what do you got to do? You get offered to install some stupid McAfee antivirus or the God blessed Ask toolbar, which was something that I always hated. And when I was doing IT work where I was cleaning out Windows machines all the time, people would go, well, this machine runs really slow. It doesn't work really well. Oh, okay, well, let me take a look. And I would boot it up and look at the desktop and open the browser. And they'd have 14 of these horrible, junky toolbars stuck on it, okay? No wonder the machine was running slow. And you'd look down in the little quick launch area down there, and there'd be like 15 icons with all the junkware that they had installed. And even if you are trying to be really careful about this, I mean, it's like, okay, I'm going to do my update. If you don't tick this little box they show in this image right here, guess what? You're going to end up with the God blessed Ask toolbar installed because you wanted to update Java. And this happens all the time, man. Now, these days, Java is pretty much on its way out, being deprecated. At least that's what I hear. And of course, if you run Linux, then I don't even use Oracle Java anymore. I did a couple years ago, but it's gotten to the point now where Ice-T is so good that I don't even worry about it, and I don't even activate it unless I absolutely need it. But this was a big pain in the butt for years. It's like, and it's not just here. I mean, like, try and upgrade Firefox. Try and upgrade a lot of other different, different pieces of software. And tucked in there, it's like, oh, we're going to give you this piece of junk along with it. That just doesn't happen in the Linux ecosystem. It doesn't. So it just doesn't work that way. And I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but if you download something from an official repository on Linux, you're not going to see that. Oh, great, guys. Now you're grinding up all the limbs you cut up. You hear that? I need a soundproof studio, gang. Okay, let's keep on going here. Just sounds lovely, doesn't it? Linux will run on most anything. Boy, this is the truth. I love it when I run across junk hardware, because the first thing that I do is load Linux on it and see if I can get it to work. And in this picture, it's running on a rather dumpy old laptop. And this is a distribution called Damn Small Linux. That's what we're looking at here. And it's just amazing to me that really old hardware will work really, really well with Linux. My brother has a machine. If you can hear me over the grinder, if my brother has a machine that's about 10 years old, it has a 32-bit Celeron processor in it. It's got 512 megabytes of RAM in it, and it's got a 40 gigabyte hard drive. And he actually uses that machine to do all his stuff. He's running Linux Lite on it, and it works really, really well. So that's one thing I do love about Linux. You can get it to work on some pretty old stuff. And finally, you can break it, you can fix it, you can change it, and you can love it. Linux has so many choices available for your desktop. I mean, you can choose your desktop. You can theme your desktop. You can change out your desktop. You can change out your file manager. You can change out everything about your Linux system to make it be what you want it to be. It's completely modular. You can start from scratch, and then you can build your own system and only install the stuff that you want. You can start with a pre-made system, and then you can go through and swap out all the applications that you want. Now, I don't do a lot of that because I have a lot of machines to keep up with, and I'm pretty content with how Ubuntu Mate and Linux Mint work out of the box, so I don't do a lot of changing. But I do know people that as soon as they get a hold of their system, they've got to theme up Compiz, they've got to theme up their desktop, and then they got to grab themselves some really cool applications to put on there. They want to put on a different terminal. They need a different file manager. They want to theme up their terminal for Bash. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's one of the greatest things about this system. If you use a Macintosh or a Windows machine, you're getting the experience that they want you to get, okay? This is what it does. This is what it looks like. This is how it works. There are so many choices in Linux, and the more you learn about it, the more you can start coming up with an idea of what is going to work best for you for your workflow, or just what you want to work with and look at every day. You can change everything about it. And that is an absolutely wonderful thing about Linux. And that is an end to my little video, 10 things I love about Linux. Love to hear your feedback on this. Thank you for watching it. I'm sorry about the guys who are cutting up the limbs and now are running a grinder. What they are is they're right out behind the house. I got a pretty big backyard, but they're down there right in the alley, man. So that's why they're doing that. And like I said, seems like ever since the weather's turned nice, every time I sit down to do a video, somebody fires up some big piece of equipment like that. All right, check out freedompenguin.com for lots of great articles about Linux from contributors such as myself. And I haven't posted anything there in quite a while, but I'll come up with something down the road, hopefully, if they haven't kicked me off because I haven't sent them anything in a while. Matt, I'm still here. And also check out Easy Linux on the web. The new web page is up and running. The Contact Us page now works. Yay! I will get an email if you send me something through the Contact Us page, hopefully. And worked all weekend on that. And also check out Easy Linux on Facebook if you would, because there you can keep up with what's going on in the Easy Linux community. And if you do, give it a like. I would appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Oh, they're done. They turned off the grinder. Perfect timing, because I'm done with the video. We'll talk again soon.